day and welcome to Covenant Science Tutorial channel on YouTube. Today's live session is going to be on a topic called sentences. We're going to look at the definition of a sentence, the types of sentences, components of the sentence, and then sentence patterns. Alright. Now, a sentence is basically a collection of words. That's what we call a sentence. A sentence is a collection of words. And the words that make up a sentence must adhere to grammatical principles that are consistent with the language of communication. For example, in the English language, we have certain rules that govern the use of words, alright, and generally the formation of sentences. These rules are what we call grammar rules or syntax rules. For example, a sentence like book on is the chair. Okay, it is a collection of words, so it is a sentence in one sense, but in another it does not follow grammatical principles. As such, this first sentence here lacks what we call grammatical correctness. Okay, now we have a second sentence that says the book is on the chair. This makes more sense than the previous because it follows grammatical principles. Now, during sentence formation, it could be in verbal communication or in written communication, we produce what we call streams of words. So in verbal communication, I will produce streams of words known as phonemes. Alright, these streams of words are actually sentences, but they are oral. That is, they are made up of speech sounds, and these speech sounds, we call them phonemes. In written communication, such as in letter writing and so on, we produce streams of words that are a combination of letters, and these letters are called graphemes. We can proceed. There are three basic types of sentences in the English language, and they include the simple sentence, the complex sentence, and the compound sentence. The simple sentence is the simplest of the three forms. Alright? They are arranged in order of, should we say increasing difficulty or complexity. Alright, so a simple sentence is said to be simple because it is actually simple in structure. A complex sentence is called complex because its makeup is complex. A compound sentence is called compound because its makeup is compound. Now, not to worry, what do we mean by simple, complex, and compound? To understand these three, you will need to know what we call a clause. Alright? In the English language, we have different types of clause. You have the noun clause, the adverbial clause, the adjectival clause, and so on. But for the sake of understanding the types of sentences, you will need to know two basic types of clause when it comes to sentence formation. One is the independent clause, and two is the dependent clause. So a clause is said to be independent if it can stand on its own and make grammatical sense. That is, a clause is said to be independent if on its own it is correct and does not require any other clause or expression to derive its meaning. Yes, that is what it means to be independent, an independent clause. A clause is basically, by definition, a group of words that contain what we call a finite verb. A finite verb, on the other hand, is that verb that can be affected by time, affected by number, affected by persons. Simply put, when we say a finite verb is affected by time, we say, or we simply say, that that verb can show what we call tense. That is, the verb can possess what we call inflectional forms. It can reveal present time and past time. That's what it means to be affected by time. Alright? Such a verb too is affected by persons. By persons there, we're talking about not just singular and plural persons, but also the personal pronouns in English. Excellent. So, if a sentence carries only one part, and that part is an independent clause, alright, that is, it has one part, you cannot divide it into two, it is just a part, and that one part expresses a complete thought, it is an independent clause. For example, I am fine. Such a sentence is said to be simple. Such a sentence is described as simple. I'll take that again. If a sentence has only one part, yes, one part, you cannot separate the sentence into two parts such that one part is independent and the other is dependent. Such a sentence is simple in structure. So I gave an example, which is I am fine. He was here. I laughed hard. All these are simple sentences because we cannot divide them into two different parts. So they express a complete thought as one independent clause. Excellent. The concept of complex comes in when we have a sentence with two parts. One of the parts is independent and the other is dependent. Please take note of that. In a complex sentence structure, one part is independent, the other is dependent. Now, the part that is dependent is separated from the part that is independent with a kind of conjunction that we call a subordinator. So in the use of English, we have actually three types of conjunctions, okay? But we usually cite just two main types, but I'll tell you the third type. The first type of conjunction is called subordinators. The second type of conjunction is called coordinators, while the last type, which is a form of the coordinator, is called a correlative coordinator. So I'll put that down here. Conjunctions in English include, I made mention of subordinators. Examples of subordinators, we could have an expression such as when, a subordinator. Okay. Number two, we have coordinators. Now, the coordinators, I could have an example such as but, something else we call and. These are coordinators. Then the third type is what I call correlative coordinators. Okay? An example of a correlative coordinator is what we call either or. Either or. So what do you notice here? A subordinator, as you can see, e.g. when. A coordinator, as you can see, e.g. but, then and. A correlative coordinator is usually, unlike the first two, the correlative coordinator is actually a combination. It is a pair. Yes. Alright, so conjunctions that go in pairs belong to this category. Alright, conjunctions like either or, neither nor, not only but also. They are examples of correlative coordinators. Okay, so back to types of sentences. A sentence is said to be complex when it contains two parts, that is, we can split it into two parts, all right, such that both parts are joined or separated. We could use joined or separated. That's what a conjunction does. It joins or it helps to, separate two things in a way. Good. So a sentence structure is said to be complex if it is made up of two parts that are joined by means of a subordinator. Okay? So if I have, for example, a statement like I will eat when I get home. I will eat when I get home. You observe that we have two parts here. The first part goes, I will eat. The second part goes, when I get home. Do you see that? So we have two parts. That's great. Now, what do you notice about both parts? Which of them can stand independent of the other? You will find that it is the part that says, I will eat. Yes. So this part becomes the independent clause, while this other part that says, when I get home. When you get home, what will happen? Yes, when you get home, it leaves much to be desired. Okay? It leaves a lot of questions on the lips or on the hearts of many. So when I get home, what will happen when you get home? That makes this expression a dependent clause. Excellent. Now, joining this independent clause to the dependent clause is a conjunction here, a subordinator called when. Do you see that? So this type of sentence is then referred to as complex. That's basic. So a complex sentence is just a sentence having two parts, or a sentence having one dependent and independent clause, and both are joined by means of a subordinator. That's a complex sentence. Excellent. Now, a compound sentence, on the other hand, is that sentence that is made up of two parts, at least. It could be more, but at least two parts, where both parts are actually independent. You see that now? Remember that a simple sentence is just a clause that is independent. A complex sentence is a sentence consisting of two parts that are separated or joined by a subordinator. A compound sentence now is a sentence comprising two parts where both parts are actually independent clauses. They can stand on their own. Yes. And in addition, both independent clauses in a compound sentence are then joined by a coordinating conjunction, such as but or what we call and. So consider the sentence, I will be there. I will be there, and I will give my speech. I will be there and I will give my speech. So you find that this is an independent clause and is our coordinator. I will give my speech is another independent clause. This is an example of what we call a compound sentence by structure. Excellent. Now, something else I need you to see. A simple sentence is one independent clause. Let's isolate I will be there. A simple sentence is one independent clause. Alright? Now, looking at this compound sentence, you will realize that it consists of two independent clauses. And a simple sentence is one independent clause. So we can then say again that a compound sentence is simply two simple sentences that are joined by a coordinator. You see that now? Good. So this is a simple sentence. This is a simple sentence. Joining both is a coordinator. A compound sentence is what we have. Alright. So these are the three basic types of sentences: simple, complex, and compound. Okay? Now, in addition to these three types, you could have other sentence structures that you call complex compound sentence and compound complex sentence. Okay, so what happens in either of them is that the number of clauses now increase. Yes. So for a compound complex sentence, you could have two independent clauses joined by means of a coordinator and one dependent clause joined to the compound part by means of a subordinator. That's all. All right. In a complex compound sentence structure, you could have two or more dependent clauses, okay, joined by means of a subordinator and then one independent clause attached. All right. But for the sake of exam purposes, these are the three sentences you should take note of: simple, complex, and compound. So now we have seen the definition of a sentence, the types of sentence. Let us now talk about the components of a sentence. Now the two main components of a sentence include the subject and the predicate, which we also call the verb. These are the traditional parts of a sentence, the basic parts of a sentence, or the primary parts of a sentence. Does this mean there are no other parts of a sentence? Of course not. So we have other parts of a sentence, such as the object, we have what is called the complement, and then we have what is called the adverbial. So subject, predicate, main parts, object, complement, adverbial, those make up what we call the peripheral parts. All right, so they are secondary parts. Good. Now, the subject of a sentence is usually a noun or a pronoun, because a pronoun is a word used instead of a noun. Okay, so nouns and pronouns usually make up or form or take the subject position. All right, now we have situations in English where a verb can be at the starting position of a sentence, e.g., walking down the road. You see that now? Good. Number 4, an adjective can also occupy the subject position. But for an adjective to occupy the subject position, it must be preceded by an article, either definite or indefinite. For example, the rich also cry. The rich. Rich there is an adjective, okay, telling us about people who have, a lot of money, or they could be rich in anything, but it is occupying the subject position simply because the article D was attached. As a matter of fact, when such a thing happens to an adjective, it automatically becomes a noun. Okay, the rich also cry. The needy require our sympathy. You see that? Good. So I take that again. The position of the subject can be occupied by a noun, a pronoun, a verb in rare cases, and then an adjective. And for an adjective to be considered the subject, it must be preceded by the English articles, either a or an, or what we call D, THE. Right? Now, the predicate, which I also call the verb, is considered the grammatical motto of a sentence, because if a verb is not present in a sentence, such a sentence will not make sense. So verbs are like grammatical or syntactic vehicles that help to move us. Okay, they move us from one point to another in a sentence, and then they provide a message. Yes, so without verbs we will not understand what a person is saying, or what a person is doing, or how a person feels. Their state of being we may not be able to comprehend. Okay, so verbs are the grammatical motors of any sentence. Now, we have the component of a sentence called the object. The object is of two types. We have what is called the direct object and the indirect object. So by basic definition, the object is the receiver of an action. Okay, so on Mr. Techno's channel, English with Techno, I've talked about the basic components of a sentence, and I've given critical definition of the subject, the verb, the object, the complement, and the adverbial. You can also find videos on that right here on Covenant Science Tutorial channel for those who may be joining us for the first time and have not been, they've not gotten themselves abreast of the information on this channel. Priceless pieces of information just for your consumption. Do well to avail yourself of that opportunity. Now, the compliment is basically a remark, something you say, an opinion you have about a person or a thing. That opinion could either be good or it could be bad. Whichever the case, it is a compliment. The compliment is of two types. We have what is called the subject compliment and then the object compliment. Excellent. So anything you say, any opinion you have about the subject of a sentence is what we call the subject complement. Any opinion you have about the object of a sentence is what we call the object complement. Lastly, we have the adverbial, and by definition, adverbs are a group of words that tell us more about the action of a verb. So they help to modify verbs. They also help to modify adjectives and other adverbs. And your adverbs are of different types. There's a video already on the channel on that. You can go watch the video. We have adverbials of place, of time, of manner, of degree, of frequency, of concession, okay, and so on. You can check out those adverbials on the teaching video right here on Covenant Science Tutorial channel. So we're going to look at the sentence patterns now. Now we have seen the components of a sentence, which include the subject, the verb, the object, the complement, and the adverbial. Now let's talk about the sentence patterns. The sentence patterns in English include the following. Number one, we have the SV. I'm going to attach certain notations to these patterns. Do well to take note of these notations. Okay, so these are the acceptable sentence patterns in the English language. Basic sentence patterns. Alright. Now there are many of them, over 13. Okay, but for exam purposes, these are the 7 patterns that you ought to know. Yes, I said 7, but numbered on the board we have 8. But if you look closely, you will find that there is a particular type of pattern that was repeated twice. It was repeated rather, but the verbal component was different in each one. Okay, so let's start from the top. We have the pattern known as the SVI. The VI there stands for intransitive verb or verb intransitive. Now, that is the simplest form of sentence, comprising just the subject and the verb, which is also called the predicate. This is why when I mentioned the components of a sentence, I stated clearly that there are 2 main parts of a sentence. If you could remember, or if you recall properly, these parts are the subject and the verb. Alright, so only the subject and the verb are enough to form a sentence without the inclusion of an object or a complement or even an adverbial. So just a subject and a verb can form a sentence, as we can see here. Okay, so in the SV pattern, the verb involved is usually intransitive. Now, what is an intransitive verb? An intransitive verb is simply that verb that does not take a direct object. Yes, that is to say, the intransitive verb does not have a direct receiver of the action. You see that now? Good. So, a verb is said to be intransitive if it cannot accommodate a direct object. Alright? A typical example is in the expression contained in John 11, verse 35, where the Bible told us Jesus wept. Jesus wept. You see that? Good. So, we have Jesus as the subject and we have wept as our intransitive verb. The sentence in itself is expressing a complete thought. Jesus wept, meaning he cried. You see that? Excellent. So this is an example of intransitive verb usage in sentence construction. Okay? We could have another statement like elephants trumpet, where elephant is the subject and trumpet is your intransitive verb. I believe we get that. Okay. Now, number 2, we have the pattern SVO. In a more detailed sense, you can see that the V here is carrying the subscript T, meaning transitive verb. And the object here is carrying the subscript D, meaning direct object. So, in this pattern, we have 3 main players. The subject, the person who performed the action, the verb, which is the action performed, the object, which is the person who received the action. Okay, so an example, the teacher rebuked Wale. The teacher rebuked Wale. This is S, this is transitive verb, and this is the direct receiver of the rebuke. So we have a pattern here known as the SVO. Okay? So most often in exam conditions, when questions are to be asked in this category, the examiner simply gives you sentences, copious ones, and you are expected to identify the patterns. Yes, by categorizing certain components as subject, as verb, as object, as complement, or as adverbials. Okay, for the sake of this video, I will be giving just one examples each. Yes, with the exception of the first pattern where I mentioned a second example. All right, but you can do well to form more sentences under each pattern. Yes, I'm going to explain them as simply as possible, and you're going to have a nice time forming sentences. Let's go. The third type of sentence pattern is the SVOO. Okay, where the first object is indirect and the second object is direct. You see that? So the verb here is still a transitive verb. So a typical example of such a sentence is, my mom gave me a present. My mom gave me a present. So my mom, the giver, the performer of the action, gave the transitive verb, me, the indirect object, and what was given to me? A present, the direct object. You see that? Very simple, very basic, as easy as ABC. Okay, so this is a typical example of what we call the SVOO pattern. Now, number 4 and number 5 both have similar forms, with the exception of the verbal component. So the difference in both is in the area of their verbs. They both have a subject, they both carry the same type of complement, which is the subject complement. But then one uses the verb to be, while the other uses the copular verbs. Okay, now you should know that the verb to be belongs to a family of verbs which we call the primary auxiliary verbs. And the verb to be has a lot of peculiarities, but I'm going to mention just one. One peculiarity the verb to be has is that while other verbs can possess 5 inflectional forms, the verb to be possesses 8. What do we call inflectional forms? Number 1, the base form. 2, the singular form. Base form is also known as the plural form. 2, singular form. 3, the ed1, also known as the past tense. 4, the ed2, also known as the past participle tense. And 5, the ing form, which we call the continuous form. And it could be present continuous or past continuous. You see? So we have 5 inflectional forms that every verb must possess. So the verb to be has 8 of these forms. All right, so the verb to be includes be, that is be, being, been, being, being, is, am, was, are, were. You count that and they sum up to 8. You see that now? Excellent. So don't forget, I said the verb to be is under the primary auxiliary verb. Good. So in the SVC pattern, the first, we have the verb to be as the main element here. And then the complement is usually of the subject. That's why it is called C subscript S, which is subject complement. So in a sentence like, they are beautiful, where they could be anybody or any group of persons, they becomes the subject, are becomes our verb to be, and then beautiful becomes a complement. But this complement is about these people. So it is the subject complement. You get that now? Very good. Now for the SVC that carries the copular verb as its main verbal element, a copular verb, you should know this, is also called a linking verb. So a copular verb is any verb that helps us to link, to connect a subject to its complement. A typical example of a verb that performs this function is the verb is. All right, so we have a sentence like she is pretty. All right, we also have another type of copular verb which we call seem, S-E-E-N, or even what we call appear. All right, for example, I make a statement like my mother-in-law seems unhappy. Seems unhappy. You see that now? So the verb seem is linking my mother-in-law to the opinion I made, to the comment, the remark I made of her. So that remark in itself is the complement of the subject. Very good. Now, the next sentence pattern we have is the SVOC. The verb is transitive, the object is direct, and the complement this time is not for the subject but for the object. So you can see it is C subscript O. For example, the class elected Emmanuel prefect. The club made Mr. Mike chairman. You see that now? The club made Mr. Mike chairman. Now, the chairman there is talking about Mr. Mike. So that's a complement of the object. Do you see that? Very good. So that pattern falls under the SVOC. We have what is called the SVA, where the A here stands for adverbials. SVA, the A stands for adverbials. So the verb here is the verb to be. A typical example is in the statement, elephants are everywhere. For example, elephants are everywhere. You see that? Good. So elephants become your subject. Are is your verb to be. Everywhere is your adverbial of location. Adverbial of location. I hope we're learning. Excellent. The last sentence pattern here is the SVOA. Subject, transitive verb, direct object, and usually an adverbial of location. E.g., I, subject, put, transitive verb, object, the marker, for example, on the board. You see that? Good. So I put the marker on the board. I is the subject, put is the transitive verb, the marker is what we call the direct object, on the board is what we call the adverb of location. Do you see that? Excellent. So these are the basic sentence patterns that we have in the English language. Do well to run through this video over and over again. The definition of a sentence, the types of sentences, the components of sentences, and then the sentence patterns that exist in the English language. Alright? Do not forget to like this video, drop a comment if you have learned something, and share the link to your friends, your fellow coursemates. This is a 100 level course, as it were. So share with your coursemates and other persons in their fresh year as freshmen and fresh women. Don't forget, this is Covenant Science Tutorial, and we are all about science education. Till next time, it's goodbye from here. Okay.